funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.
I'm Paul Wright and you're listening to the seventh and last programme of Greening the White House, the 7-part series which explores the island of Ireland ancestry of various US presidents, with a key focus on the ancestral homesteads and locations linked to them in Ireland. In our last programme we investigated the Irish roots of the 37th US President Richard Nixon and also the 40th US President Ronald Reagan. In this programme the spotlight falls on the 44th US President Barack Obama, who served in high office from 2009 to 2017, and whose maternal ancestors came from Moneygall in County Offaly. To further explain Barack Obama's County Offaly roots, here's Canon Stephen Neal, currently Rector of Selbridge in County Kildare, but previously Rector of Moneygall in County Offaly.
His roots go back to around 1850 when his third great-grandfather, Fulmouth Kearney, emigrated to America. And he was of Moneygall origins. Some members of the family had previously emigrated actually before Fulmouth. The family by trade were shoemakers, relatively prosperous in terms of the local population. They'd been involved in the Famine Relief Committee during the famine. And he had quite an interesting pedigree in terms of his own family. He had cousins who were bishops of Ossory and indeed academics in Trinity. So he seemed to come from, I suppose, he certainly was of the more privileged background. And he had siblings in Moneygall, and they all ultimately emigrated. Unfortunately, there's none of the Kearneys left in Moneygall at this stage. The links locally that remain are with the Healy family. And you may have heard of the Henry Healy, who was known as the 8th cousin of Barack Obama, Henry VIII. And their family intermarried 3 generations before that in the early 18th century. So Henry and the President Barack Obama would share an 8th great-grandparents.
The Kearney family left Moneygall between 1849 and 1851 and headed to Ross County, Ohio.
Henry Healy from Moneygall, who as Stephen Neal mentioned is himself related to President Obama.
They didn't leave because of poverty. They left as it wasn't the famine. They were promised land. So like any good Irishman or woman, the appetite for a couple of acres appealed, but the condition was the entire family had to emigrate. So that's why over a 3-year period, the father, Joseph Kearney, went first, followed then by Fulmouth, President Obama's third great-grandfather, and his mother then followed in 1851, Phoebe Kearney, and that wiped out that line of the family here in Moneygall. And obviously, I suppose the rest is history. Fulmouth married Charlotte Holloway, and he is, as President Obama has described him, his grandfather's grandfather. So it's that close of a connection when you boil it down.
And when did you first learn about your link to President Obama yourself?
Yeah, he was Senator Obama at the time when we discovered, but he had declared his intention to run.
So about 2007.
About 2007. It was around April, May of 2007.
And Stephen Neal had this to say about how he got involved in the search for Barack Obama's roots.
It was prior to Easter in 2007, and I got an email from a researcher in Salt Lake City in Utah inquiring about the Kearney family. No reference at that stage to Barack Obama, and I get a lot of inquiries, so it sat on my in tray for a while. Followed up, though, by a phone call from the same researcher who said this was actually to do with Senator Barack Obama, as he was at the time, and this Kearney family were his ancestors. They knew that much, and they were trying to trace the part of Offaly where his ancestors had come from. They had a marriage licence for the Diocese of Killaloe, which involved Joseph Kearney and a Phoebe Donovan. And he asked me to check my records, and sure enough, I came across Joseph and Phoebe in our records in connection with marriages and baptisms of Barack Obama's ancestor Joseph Kearney's siblings, and various documents which tied in with the American documents. So they linked exactly with the details of those who had emigrated from Ireland and turned up in America. So it was a proof positive link at that stage.
Evidential trail, irrefutable.
Yeah, and the rest is history. I suppose a month later there was a press release to the world's press, and on that day I did over 50 interviews worldwide
50 interviews.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was extraordinary. It was just non-stop. Radio, TV, Today Show New York, India Times, Telegraph Times, Sky, RT. It was just never stopped.
I'd say you couldn't believe it, Steve.
It was,
it's the kind of thing of dreams a way you couldn't make up.
It was quite surreal. The whole thing was quite surreal. And he was already Barack Obama was already on my radar. I'd read some of his writings, and I knew he was very much a shoe-in at that stage. So the thought that he had links directly to our parish was extraordinary. But
because he wasn't president at that stage.
No, he wasn't.
He was running for president.
He was running.
But he was a hot contender.
Exactly. He was a hot contender, and he'd only barely declared at that stage. But he was very popular at that stage, and there was already high hopes. And of course, he was different than anybody who'd gone before, basically because of his skin colour, and no more than anything else. Obviously, the first African American potential president, which was a huge thing.
In November 2008, Barack Obama was elected the 44th President of the United States. His presidency began in January 2009. Now, over 2 years later, he declared his intention to visit his ancestral roots in County Offaly. Ollie Hayes, the owner of Ollie Hayes' Bar in Moneygall.
On March 17, 2011, he informed the Taoiseach in Patrick's Day that he was going to visit Moneygall, and he arrived here on the 23rd of May 2011 on a Monday. And then it all started. He visited Moneygall, he walked up the street, he greeted 3,000 people on the street and had an interaction with a lot of people, handshaking, children, picking them up and God knows what. Then he entered the house where his ancestors would have left Moneygall from, which was down the street here, about 6 doors down. And he went in there, and then he went into a shop where he bought a souvenir. He bought a bit of pottery there, and then he moved up here to the pub where he met 31.
Your pub here, Ollie Hayes'
yeah.
Bar in the centre of Moneygall.
Yeah, in the pub he met the family, relatives of his ancestry, Healy's, and there was other family members from Cork and Bursakane as well, all connected to the president. He met them here, and then he actually viewed the actual family records from the past. Phoebe and Joseph Carney would have been the mother and father that lived in the house down the street, and their child, Fulmut, was the president's great-great-great-grandfather. So he viewed the birth records and marriage records of all them. They were shown to him by Canon Stephen Neal. Then he approached the counter, and from there then he had a pint, chatted with us for a while, and at that stage then the visit was complete. But a surprise occurred then when the cameras had left and the media. I said to Mrs. Obama, would she like a fill of pint? And she said she would. The door was locked, cameras were gone out, everyone was waiting on the street for him, but both of them came behind the counter, and Mrs. Obama filled a couple of pints of Guinness.
And there's a famous, iconic photograph. I've seen it in a number of places. It went viral years ago, and it's up all over the internet still to this day, of Michelle Obama pulling the pint. But you were telling me earlier on, we were just looking at a copy of that photograph in your bar inside, and you were saying to me it wasn't as simple as her getting it right the first time. Am I right, Ollie?
Well, she did her best, and she's the first time filling a Guinness. She did very well now, but a little bit of overspill on the head, and President Obama pointed it out to her, and she said, I'll prove him wrong, I'll fill another one. And she filled a perfect pint. And our parish priest, Father Joe Kennedy, put his hand up for that one, and he drank that Guinness, and he took home the glass, believe it or not. Yeah, priest stole the glass out of the pub.
You'd only get in Moneygall, that's for sure.
We've a great bit of crack over that.
And here's what Canon Stephen Neal had to say about a photograph of the parish records which he showed President Obama during his visit to Moneygall.
The photograph shows myself and President Obama holding the baptismal records, which show the baptismal records of his ancestors, his third great-grandfather, Fulmouth Carney, and siblings. And that document is quite a fragile one. It's since gone into the custody of the state. And he was very impressed to actually hold this document for first hand.
The original document.
That's the original document, obviously transcribed by hand. And it's something that really he was fascinated by. He has a great sense of history, I think, and he really appreciated being able to actually put his hands on it and examine the original document.
And what about walking around Moneygall and knowing that this is the place where his ancestors had done business and lived and everything? I'd say it was quite moving.
It was, and he was particularly moved to walk into the family house, which is still on the main street.
And during my recent visit to Moneygall, Ollie Hayes showed me the Kearney family house.
This is where Fulmouth Kearney was born, and Phoebe and Joseph, Fulmouth's mother and father, lived, and they emigrated from this here. And President Obama walked in that door and went into the rooms of the house, which had originally been a one-storey house at the time. And
tractor going by there in the background. No need for rural effects in this program.
No, I'm telling you, the tractors have to stay going. So you can see the plaque here outside the door on the wall. And
what does the plaque say, please,
well, it just said,
Ollie?
To commemorate the visit of Moneygall, President Barack Obama, 44th President of the United States of America, on the 23rd of May 2011, to his home where his ancestors Joseph, Phoebe and their sons Fulmouth Kearney lived before they immigrated to the US in the 1850s. And then it's all written in Irish as well.
Okay, fantastic. And it's got a great depiction of the president, the Irish harp, and the US
presidential
seal of office.
So it's a very, very nice.
I also walked into the ancestral home with him, and the Donovan family were in there, who owned the house. And I always remember him coming in and pounding his foot on the timber floor and saying, "My grandfather's grandfather left from here." He choked up and he looked at the images on the wall of the house at the time, the artist's impression, and how the village has grown or changed from the 1840s to current day.
Henry Healy, a distant relative of President Obama.
And next thing, the First Lady came in and he ushered her to show her everything and describe everything that he had just been told. He had taken it in. And the same when he got shown the ancestral records. He took that all in, and the First Lady followed over then after him and said to Canon Stephen Neal, who was custodian of the records, "Can you explain that to me as well? I want to be able to share it with my daughters." And those sort of things really showed that, that it meant something to them. And
there was a connect made. It wasn't just ticking a box, so to speak.
It wasn't, no. And I do think both the First Lady and the President felt at the time a genuine connection. Why do I think it? It's the longest line that the President and First Lady ever done together, shaking hands. They spent over 48 minutes on the street shaking hands, and we were told by the White House at the time it's the longest that they've ever done together. So that in itself is a little record that Moneygall holds. And there's little things like that, I suppose, that just showed they felt the warmth of the community, and I think the community felt the warmth of them, because still today everyone has their story. Still today everyone will share their story, and I don't think it's a day that will fade too quickly in the memories of anyone that was there.
Everybody got to see him on the day, which was the amazing thing, and virtually everybody shook his hand. I mean, he gave such time to the people. He walked the line of the street in the most appalling weather conditions, if you recall. It was one of the worst days ever. It was raining every direction, and he and Michelle walked the whole length of the street up and down. Extraordinary buzz. It really was.
Stephen, Neil, here's what Moneygall local woman Sinead Culleton had to say about meeting President Obama.
Look, I have cousins living in America, and they said themselves we wouldn't get within an ounce's roar of the man, and here we were. My youngest was only a baby, and Michelle touched him and she said he's so beautiful, and we were like, yes, and Barack tapped his head, and and that was the same as he went along, and we weren't even to the front of the queue. Like, the people in the front got hugs and kisses and whatnot. It was pretty amazing.
It's just from talking to people that he really, he spent a lot of time. He was really, enjoying it.
Yeah. You could see by the security detail they weren't happy. They weren't, sure that it was safe, but he didn't. He just threw caution to the wind, and he came along and he made his way from the very start right up along, and you could see people skipping back and coming back up to try and meet him for the second time, you know. And
I shook your hand
yeah,
twice.
Exactly. Anyone could do it once. We did it twice, you know. But it was that kind of a day, and it was just delirious. It was fantastic.
I'd say delirious and surreal. Would I be right?
100%. Oh, so a sister of mine was with us. She's a fabulous photographer. She took amazing photographs on the day, and looking at them, you're just going, did that really happen? Were we there? Was that just? And that's here. That happened, and we were here when that happened.
Mike Hayes is my name.
No, Mike, you were here on the day itself in May 2011 when President Barack Obama visited. What was it like?
Very, very exciting. Unbelievable. You know, just.
What do you mean now by unbelievable?
I suppose look at the preparation for the couple of days before it, during it, after it. You know, I'll never see anything like it again anyway. So
it was just a kind of a once in a lifetime experience that all of a sudden Moneygall is turned on its head and it's the centre of world attention.
That's it now. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
And what was the mood like, Michael?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Everyone was delighted. Everyone was happy. You know, everyone pulled their weight. Everyone done what had to be done. No qualms, no arguing, no bickering. You know, everything was done right.
And Kaylee Carr from Moneygall, who was 14 years old when the President came, shares her memories.
Oh, it was like kind of unreal. Everyone was excited and happy, and there was just no kind of bad vibe at all. It was just really fun, I suppose, for a 14-year-old at that time.
And I'd say, a day that you'll never forget.
Oh no, I'll never forget it. I shook his hand, I shook Michelle's hand. So I did, yeah.
Wow, you shook the hands of the President and his wife. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, we did. Myself, my mother and my grandmother. So it was really amazing, yeah.
That's brilliant. And does anyone ever ask you about since Kaylee?
Yeah, they do. I work in a cafe in Roscrea, the Ugly Duckling, and a lot of tourists will come into us, and when they find out where I'm from, they're just kind of like, oh, you're from Obama Village, as a lot of them like to call it. So yeah, I do get asked about it quite a bit.
What kind of questions would they ask?
They'd ask, obviously, was it here when he came, and what's it like now in the village, and the plaza is just down the road, so there it's kind of a great buzz. It really kind of put Moneygall on the map, I suppose.
This is Noel Ryan here, local man from the village. Actually, on the lead up to this, I'm a painter and decorator myself, so I cashed in on a lot of work.
With the Barack Obama visit.
Yeah, and it was good for business anyway, so I cashed in, and it was...
And rightly so.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, a great day for Moneygall, Noel. You were there yourself when the President and the entourage visited and everything. What was it like?
Oh, sure, it was a welcome break in the finish, because there was about 2 or 3 days before and after the President was here that was on shutdown. So, needless to say, we partied well, and it was good crack, and a lot of people came home from America, met up with a lot of old friends and school pals of yesteryear.
I'd say kind of, see, what was it like? You shook hands with the President, did you, Noel, yourself?
I didn't actually shake hands with the President myself, no, but he was right outside my own house. On the day we couldn't even get into our own houses. We were all outside the house. The guards were patrolling all our houses. So it was
security,
security arrangement. Yeah, overload, exactly. But we didn't mind that. We could live with that for the day.
There was that underlying sense that, this was something extraordinary. This little village, which has been since bypassed now, and you pass in a blink, was for that couple of hours was the centre of the world, and was the most heavily defended part of the world, on the place on the planet, if you like.
Stephen Neal once again.
It was quite extraordinary. One of the things that actually happened was they even built a special road so that the convoy wouldn't have to reverse at any stage. They could do a continuous circuit of the village for security reasons. And they actually even built a special road off the motorway.
And if that wasn't bad enough, pub owner Ollie Hayes even saw his humble kitchen transformed into the temporary nerve centre of the US government.
The Americans set up a command post here in our kitchen, here in this room you're in, for the President, which nobody really knew about, but afterwards they didn't mind, because that was a command post where if anything happened that day in Moneygall, the President would enter this kitchen here where you're sitting, here at the back of the pub.
So this would be the nerve centre of anything, maybe some kind of
yes,
global incident. He would have to
quite amount of gear and electronic equipment and telephone lines put in
Was
here.
there any kind of special briefcases, little black boxes, or whatever? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So in other words, maybe the nuclear codes and all that kind of thing.
I had that myself. No, because we never would say that was here, but afterwards they said it doesn't matter. Spoke afterwards, but they said no, it doesn't matter. He's gone now, but it shows people that the American president is always has a command post wherever he is in the world, and my kitchen was his command post that day if anything happened.
Hard to believe, Ollie. I mean, you couldn't make it up. If somebody was saying, "Oh, by the way, darling, next week, President will be coming and he'll be using the kitchen as a command post. You won't be able to. You won't be able to cook the Irish stew that day."
Yeah, well, he did say to me he knew what I did. We didn't have to give this our private, but I think that was a big part. He said it to me.
The people of Moneygall will never forget the happy day in 2011 when they welcomed home their most famous ancestral son, Barack Obama, and his wife, Michelle. Henry Healy.
I always remember the emotion afterwards when he got into the car, and I walked back down from the village, and I watched as hundreds ran towards Ollie's bar, and I remember standing back in the middle of the road and with people come up and patting me on the back, but I was just amazed at what it had done for our community, that 3,500 people were here. They came because of a very distant connection, but a connection that President Obama wanted to embrace. And I still pinch myself, and I don't think I'll ever see the image of so many people running around Moneygall ever again. And
the cameras and helicopters and whatnot.
Yeah. And like I did, it felt quite emotional. I remember at the time there was a documentary maker, Ed Godsell, and Ed was recording everything from nearly the get-go. And I remember him coming up and asking me, "How do you feel?" And I had to hold back the tears. I was so emotional at the time to think what we had pulled off, and
because it is kind of like winning the World Cup of sorts, you know what I mean, in a parallel, so to speak. It's a big deal. I mean, here you are, your village, your community in the world spotlight. For all the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly, for all the right reasons. And I think that's why we embraced the story as well. It was a good news story. It was a quirky story, an African American president with Irish ancestry.
In recent times, Moneygall Village has witnessed the opening of Barack Obama Plaza, which is managed by prior Speaker Henry Healy, one of Barack Obama's distant Irish relatives. The plaza includes a service station, diners, meeting rooms, museum and much more. Henry Healy.
We currently employ 174 people. Now, take into account that in the 2016 census, Moneygall had 316 residents. So we have over 50% of the population of Moneygall nearly employed in the plaza. And we're supporting a lot of local groups and charities. And saying that, the community have really embraced it, and they use the facilities here for the benefit of their organisations, but for the benefit of the community. So it's a win-win for us here in the plaza.
Over the course of this 7-part Greening the White House series, we've investigated the island of Ireland ancestry of various US presidents, with a key focus on the ancestral homesteads and locations linked to them in Ireland. As a result, we visited the likes of the Andrew Jackson Cottage in Carrickfergus, County Antrim, the Ulysses S. Grant Homestead in County Tyrone, the Kennedy Homestead in Dunganstown, County Wexford, and many other places, just too numerous to mention here. However, believe it or not, the person from Ireland with the strongest connection to the White House is not a politician, but rather a certain County Kilkenny architect, Henry Healy.
The White House wouldn't be there without one guy who designed it, a guy by the name of James Hoban. James Hoban was born in 1758 and he's of Kilkenny descent. And The design of the White House is very much on the same design as Leinster House, our own Leinster House in Dublin. So he's had a very influential role on the building, and he also has a bar named after him in DuPont Circle in Washington DC, owned by a Dublin man by the name of Paddy Whelan.
Wow, and you probably had a drink there, am I right, Henry?
On a few occasions I've had a drink there, yeah. So I'd be familiar with James Hoban's story, and again, it's great. Another great little point for the Irish over many other nations with great architects. Look at ours, and it's the most revered house in the world.
And to conclude this Greening the White House series on a suitable note, I talk with two certain tourists in the Museum of Irish Emigration, situated in the Barack Obama Plaza in Moneygall, County Offaly. Here they are to introduce themselves.
Janine Young.
And Katie Young.
Right, where are you from?
I'm from Grand Haven, Michigan via Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yes.
And yourself as well,
yes.
Katie, great. Now, we're doing the interview here in the Barack Obama Plaza. What brings you to the Barack Obama Plaza?
Well, as you know, President Obama is from Honolulu, Hawaii. That's where he was born. And so he's our president. We are very fond of him. We're very fond of his presidency and the things that he was able to accomplish. My parents have met him at our home right near the golf course where he plays. He walked over, shook their hands, and he's a good man.
Wow. That's a very good connection. There's not too many people you meet in Barack Obama Plaza, actually, other than, people, from Moneygall, but people from the United States. So he's a very popular, so a huge connection with your family, and very much a hero.
Very, very much. We very much appreciate most, not all of his policies, but overall the things that he did. We feel that he represented the United States very well.
Right, and sending out the right messages, positive messages on core issues, global warming and whatnot.
Very much so. Messages of hope and idealism that we can all do it together.
Our greatest triumphs in America and Ireland alike are still to come. And Ireland, if anyone ever says otherwise, if anybody ever tells you that your problems are too big, or your challenges are too great, that we can't do something, that we shouldn't even try, think about all that we've done together. Remember that whatever hardships the winter may bring, springtime's always just around the corner. And if they keep on arguing with you, just respond with a simple creed. It's federally. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. It's federally for all you've contributed to the character of the United States of America and the spirit of the world. Thank you. And may God bless the eternal friendship between our two great nations.
Funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.